Welcome back. The case of Karmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf is still evolving. It is being alleged that a witness has come forward in this Karmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf case, and he is being referred to as a credible witness by some people on social media. I wouldn't want to indicate that he's credible or not credible. I'll wait for that to be determined by the appropriate authorities. But let's look at what this so-called credible is alleged to be saying with regards to what happened. Now, it is being alleged that this so-called credible witness was physically present at the event with his daughter when everything unfolded between Karmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf. And apparently, per the allegation, what this credible witness shared sort of changes the landscape of the whole case as far as what Anthony Karmelo is being charged as having done. So, according to the statement allegedly provided by this so-called credible witness, his name was not mentioned though, but according to this alleged statement coming from this so-called alleged credible witness, Karmelo was under the tent alone by himself and he was on his phone when the incident would eventually begin. And this person goes on to say that Karmelo was not the aggressor here, and that it was rather Austin Metcalf and his twin brother who were actually not under the tent, but then approached the tent and then proceeded to initiate a verbal exchange with Karmelo out of all the other people who were actually present under the tent. Now, let me pause here. If this is the case, and if this is true, it begins to shift the narrative. It begins to bring out new questions as to why would they do that? Why would they pick him out aside all the other people under the tent? But then again, we don't get to have a description of who those other people under the tent with Karmelo were. Is it that they were also people who were legitimately designated to be under the tent, in which case it wouldn't be a problem if they went to Karmelo Anthony because of all the people there, he was the only one who was not supposed to be there. So, this so-called credible witness's testimony continues to say that both the Metcalf twins eventually jumped on Karmelo Anthony. And I'm pausing here to ask some questions of this so-called witness statement. What does he mean by they jumped on Karmelo Anthony? Jumped on him could be interpreted in several ways. We need clarity here, because in some parlances or in some contexts, when some people use the phrase somebody has been jumped on or somebody jumped on somebody, it could sometimes be interpreted to mean that the one who did the jumping actually attacked the person who was jumped on and manifested some physical force on this person to hurt the person. It can also mean that they sort of approached this person in an aggressive manner, sort of confronted this person. So, what context is he referring to here? That clarity will be very important if this is supposed to be a credible witness statement. So, it also goes on to say that it was only after the physical altercation began, after they had jumped on Karmelo Anthony, at which time Karmelo Anthony would actually reach into his backpack and pull out a knife. And then he would proceed to use the knife in the way we all know he did, which allegedly he did, which would then lead to the demise of Austin Metcalf due to the stab to the heart. And per this person reporting what this credible witness said is saying that per this narrative, it is not a premeditation on the part of Karmelo Anthony as is being put out there by some people, but rather it is a case of self-defense. I don't know why they keep saying self-defense. I am going to put out a full episode on why this is not self-defense or why the defense of self-defense will not fly. I hope I'm not giving you a mouthful with the self-defense and defense and whatnot, but that is what I think per the little legal knowledge I have, the case of or the defense of self-defense, in this case for Karmelo Anthony, under the circumstances being reported, if they are accurate, will not fly. And don't worry, I'll put out an episode after this one where I give you the full depth of why it would not fly. I will even bring in the views of some other legal experts in the United States of America, which is very consistent with what I'm saying. And they go on to give the same breakdown that I'll give. I've already said a bit of this breakdown in my previous video breaking this case on my channel. And still, I keep seeing people talking about self-defense. And I think this is where the biases begin to show. Some people need the defense of self-defense to be appreciated because it seems their objectivity has been a bit twisted, mostly on the basis of race. And when cases like this come up, some people begin to project their own pain and racial dynamics to the issue. There are some people who may have some personal sentiments against a certain race or may themselves have been a victim of one racial incident or the other. So when such cases come up, which have some form of racial undertone, you would sometimes find that some of these people are not able to approach the case on an objective level because right from the get-go, they're already biased because of whatever they've suffered. But I digress. So let's bring it back to what I'm talking about in this video. So now, per this so-called credible or alleged credible witnesses' testimony, it is now looking like there could be some headway for Karmelo Anthony if it turns out this witness's statement is actually true. And it goes on to also talk about the fact that the incident did not actually occur on school property, as is being reported by some people. I'm waiting for an official statement that will confirm that. But this is what is allegedly being said by this so-called credible witnesses statement, that the incident didn't occur on school property. And this brings into scope the question of Karmelo Anthony being cited by some people as to how come he would actually have a knife in his possession on school property. Now they are saying that per this person's testimony, the incident actually didn't even happen, or the event was not on school property and the event didn't happen on school property, and that the location was actually a community space and not even affiliated with any school, and that the school in question was approximately 50 miles away from the location where this incident happened. So if that is the case, then the question of how come Karmelo Anthony has a knife on him on school premises is defeated. But like I said, the preamble is if that is the case. Because this case in its evolution is bringing out several reportages, several allegations, some of which is difficult to situate as far as truth, opinion, and facts, and fiction, and exaggerations are concerned. So that's how come I keep adding alleged, because in situations like this, it's usually best that the authorities handling the investigations come out to speak when they need to come out to speak, and they can be the one that is close to being credible or being deemed as credible to bring out things that we can consider as facts, because it looks like this case is going to travel the ends of time given the racial undertones. And I am not surprised. People are already drawing references to cases like Rittenhouse and other ones and trying to marry such cases, even though if you look at those cases they are trying to compare with this one, you realize that there are significant differences, and yet you still see some people pushing that narrative. I'm not a legal expert, I'm just expressing my opinion, but I think that sometimes some of those comparisons look like an attempt to compare apples and oranges. That's my opinion. Trying to compare the case of Karl Rittenhouse with this one and other cases where self-defense sufficed, it's a bit of a stretch, but hey, Like I said, I am not the legal expert. I am just giving my opinion. But what do you think? What else have you heard which I haven't touched on, which seems to suggest something contrary to the narrative being pushed out there? You can leave that in the comment section. But like I keep saying, let's learn from these things. Let's share with our loved ones. These things are happening all around. Sometimes it's just a statement said out of context, a temper that couldn't calm down, and the next thing you realize, we are here. And we are on the path of no going back, where a young 17-year-old boy's life is hanging in the balance under a $1 million bond and being charged for the murder due to the fatal stabbing of another young boy who is 17 years old, who unfortunately can't go home to his parents anymore. Subscribe to the channel, leave your comments. I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe out there.